Ira crouched lower behind the flowering silver ferns, their metallic edges catching the twin sun's rays and scattering them in fragments across her pale blue skin. She adjusted her worn hoverchair, silencing its occasional whir with practiced hands. From this vantage point on the ridge, she could observe without being observed, a skill she had mastered over 23 cycles of isolation. Below, in a circular ceremonial clearing, Zuraxian females in ornate garments floated gracefully on their hover platforms. Their elongated limbs, adorned with ceremonial bands of copper and zinc, swayed in rhythm with the ancient fertility chants. The females' reproductive organs, small, luminescent sacs located at the base of their necks, pulsed with a gentle blue glow, signaling their readiness for the seeding ceremony. Ira's hand instinctively moved to her own neck. The skin there remained dark, dormant. No glow. Never a glow. She had been born without functioning reproductive sacs, a breeding defect, as the Council of Elders had declared when she had reached maturity. In Zuraxian society, where reproduction was the highest calling, Ira was considered less than nothing. You may continue to exist. Elder Saxari had told her parents when Ira was just 14 cycles old, but she will never participate in our sacred ceremonies. Her defect must not contaminate our genetic legacy. Her mother had wept silently that night, but had not contradicted the elders' decree. By morning, Ira's belongings had been moved to a small outbuilding at the edge of their property. Her education was terminated. Her name was removed from the family lineage records. Now, at 23 cycles, Ira lived in a small dwelling at the edge of the settlement, surviving on the meager allowance provided by the community for defective citizens. She repaired hover equipment for those who didn't mind associating with her, careful never to touch them or maintain eye contact, as dictated by the rules of containment for her kind. A rustling of leaves behind her interrupted her thoughts. Ira turned her hover chair quickly, prepared to flee if discovered watching the sacred ceremony, an offense punishable by banishment to the outer regions. Instead of an elder or enforcer, however, she found herself face to face with a strange creature. It stood on two sturdy limbs rather than using a hover platform. Its skin was a warm brown rather than Zuraxian blue, and it had short, dark fur covering the top of its head. A human. Ira had heard about them. Visitors from another world who had established a research outpost near the southern groves. They studied Zuraxian plant life, apparently finding it remarkable in ways her own people took for granted. "Sorry to startle you," the human said in accented but understandable Zuraxian. "I was following a rather interesting fungal growth pattern." He gestured to a data collector in his hand. "I'm Liam, botanist from Earth. And you are?" Ira hesitated. No one had asked for her name in years. Most Zuraxians knew to avoid her on sight. "I'm no one," she replied automatically, already turning her hover chair away. "You should leave. This ridge overlooks a sacred ceremony. Your presence would be unwelcome." The human, Liam, tilted his head curiously but nodded. "I understand. The last thing I want is to disrespect local customs." Instead of leaving immediately, though, he crouched down beside a small cluster of plants growing at the base of a rock. Have you ever noticed how these mirror roots capture and reflect light differently depending on which sun is dominant? Fascinating adaptation. Ira glanced down at the plants despite herself. The mirror roots were considered sacred, used in fertility ceremonies to symbolize the reflection of life creating life. She had never been permitted to touch one. "They're used in the seeding ceremony," she found herself explaining. "The elders crush them into paste and apply it to the reproductive sacs to enhance resonance during conception." Liam looked up with interest. "Remarkable. My analysis shows they contain compounds similar to hormonal stimulants found on Earth." He gently broke off a small strand of the root and held it out to her. "Would you like one?" "For research purposes, of course." Ira recoiled. "I can't touch those. It's forbidden." "Forbidden? Why?" "Because I'm—" Ira paused, the shame of her condition closing her throat as it always did when she had to acknowledge it. "I'm defective. My reproductive sacs don't function. I cannot participate in life-giving. Understanding dawned on Liam's face, followed by something Ira couldn't identify, a softening around his eyes, a slight downward turn of his mouth. Not disgust, which was what she expected, but something else entirely. On Earth, he said quietly, we've learned that there are many ways to participate in life. Creating life is just one of them. Before Ira could respond, shouts erupted from the ceremonial clearing below. The ceremony had ended, and the participants were dispersing. Some were heading up the path that would bring them directly to where Ira and Liam stood. I have to go, Ira said urgently, activating her hover chair to full power. If they find me here, watching them. Liam nodded, tucking the mirror root into a small container which he then offered to her. Here, a gift. Not for any ceremony, but simply because it's beautiful. Like all life. Stunned, Ira accepted the container, tucking it quickly into her garment before speeding away on her hover chair. She didn't look back, but for the first time in many cycles, she felt a strange sensation in her chest, a lightness, a flutter of something forgotten. It felt impossibly like hope. For 3 days after her encounter with Liam, Ira kept the container with the mirror root hidden beneath her sleeping platform. Occasionally, when the twin suns had set and the settlement had grown quiet, she would take it out and examine it in the dim light of her single glow lamp. The root gleamed with an inner luminescence, shifting colors slightly as she turned it. Beautiful, just as Liam had said. A gift freely given, with no judgment or expectation. On the 4th day, Ira's hover chair malfunctioned as she was returning from collecting her weekly provisions. The main stabilizer gave out while she was crossing the stone bridge over the Whisper Creek, sending her veering dangerously close to the edge. She managed to halt the chair before it toppled over, but now she sat stranded, the settlement visible but too far to call for help. Not that many would respond to her anyway. As the larger of the twin suns began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape, Ira heard footsteps approaching on the bridge. She turned, expecting to see a fellow Zeraxian who would either ignore her plight or offer minimal assistance while maintaining proper distance as dictated by the rules of containment. Instead, she saw Liam carrying what appeared to be sample containers filled with various plant specimens. Mechanical trouble? He asked, setting down his containers and approaching without hesitation. Ira nodded, still unaccustomed to being addressed directly. The stabilizer. It's an older model, and replacement parts are difficult to obtain for someone like me. Liam didn't ask what she meant by someone like me. Instead, he knelt beside the hover chair and examined the underside with practiced hands. I may not be an expert in Zeraxian technology, but mechanical principles are fairly universal. Let me see. He worked silently for a few minutes, making adjustments with tools from a small kit he carried. Try it now. Ira activated the controls, and to her surprise, the chair hummed to life, floating steadily. How did you? Recalibrated the gravitational field and bypassed the damaged circuit, Liam explained. It's not a permanent fix, but it should get you home safely. If you'd like, I can help you find proper replacement parts tomorrow. Ira stared at him, bewildered by his casual kindness. Why would you help me? The question seemed to surprise him. Why wouldn't I? Because I'm a person who needed help, Liam finished for her. That's reason enough where I come from. As they made their way back toward the settlement, Liam walking beside her hover chair, Ira found herself speaking more than she had in years. She told him about her life before her diagnosis, about her early education in botanical sciences, cut short when her condition was discovered, and about her current existence on the margins of Zeraxian society. Liam listened without interruption, his face showing neither pity nor judgment, but rather genuine interest. When they reached the edge of the settlement, near the path that led to her small dwelling, he stopped. I have a proposition for you, he said. The Earth research team could use someone with knowledge of local plant life. Your early education in botanical sciences would be valuable to us. Would you consider assisting with our work? It would be paid, of course. Ira's mind raced. Employment with the humans? It wasn't forbidden. The elders had never anticipated such a possibility and thus had not explicitly prohibited it. But it would certainly draw attention, perhaps unwanted scrutiny. Yet the prospect of meaningful work, of using her mind for something beyond basic survival. "I'll need to think about it," she said finally. Liam nodded. "Of course. I'll be at the research greenhouse near the southern groves if you decide you're interested." He turned to go, then paused. "Oh, and Ira, I meant what I said about the mirror route. All life has value, including yours." As he walked away, Ira remained still, his words echoing in her mind. All life has value, including yours. Such a simple statement, yet so radical in a world that had taught her the opposite from the moment her defect was discovered. She activated her hover chair and continued toward her dwelling, the container with the mirror root pressing against her side. For the first time in many cycles, she wondered if there might be a different path for her than the one Zeraxian society had prescribed. Over the next few weeks, Ira began working with Liam and the Earth research team. Their greenhouse near the southern groves became a sanctuary of sorts, a place where her knowledge was valued, her presence welcomed, her defect irrelevant. The work itself was fascinating. The humans approached Zeraxian plant life with wonder and curiosity, seeing possibilities Ira had never considered. They were particularly interested in the medicinal properties of species that Zeraxians use primarily in ceremonial contexts. These mirror roots, Liam explained one day as they cataloged specimens, contain compounds that could potentially help regenerate nerve tissue. On Earth, that could mean helping people walk again after injuries. Ira looked up from her data pad. "Walk? Like how you walk on two limbs?" Liam nodded. "Humans are bipedal by nature, but many of us lose that ability through illness or injury. Science has made great strides in prosthetics, artificial limbs, but biological regeneration would be revolutionary. Zeraxians stopped walking centuries ago," Ira explained. "Our lower limbs atrophied as we developed hover technology. It's considered primitive now, yet efficient for certain terrains," Liam observed. "I noticed your hover chair struggles on the rocky paths near the eastern cliffs." Ira had never ventured to the eastern cliffs. In fact, she rarely traveled beyond the settlement borders, her defective status making extended journeys complicated and potentially dangerous if her hover chair malfunctioned in isolated areas. "I've never seen the eastern cliffs," she admitted. Liam looked surprised. "Never? They're breathtaking. Rock formations that catch the double sunset and glow like molten copper. Would you like to see them?" The invitation was casual, but to Ira, it felt monumental. No one had invited her anywhere in cycles. More significantly, no one had ever asked what she would like. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with the immediacy of her response. "I would like that." 2 days later, they departed for the eastern cliffs. Liam had arranged for an upgraded power cell for Ira's hover chair to ensure it could manage the journey. They set out early, while the settlement was still quiet, avoiding the main pathways where they might encounter elders or enforcers who might question their destination. As they traveled, the landscape changed gradually from the cultivated gardens of the settlement to wilder terrain. Vegetation grew in natural patterns rather than the strict geometric arrangements preferred by Zeraxian gardeners. The air carried unfamiliar scents, earthier, sharper, alive with the exhalations of plants that had evolved without Zeraxian interference. "This is the boundary," Ira said as they crossed a small stream. "I've never gone beyond this point." Liam, walking steadily beside her hover chair, smiled. "Then today is a day of firsts." The journey to the cliffs took most of the morning. As they approached, the ground became increasingly uneven, making progress in the hover chair challenging despite the upgraded power cell. Several times, Ira had to navigate carefully around obstacles or backtrack to find passable routes. "I understand now why Zeraxians abandoned walking," Liam said after a particularly difficult passage. "Hover technology certainly has advantages in this terrain." "Yet you manage," Ira observed, watching his sure-footed progress with a mixture of curiosity and something like envy. There was a freedom in his movement, an autonomy her hover chair could never provide. They reached the cliffs just as the larger sun began its descent toward the horizon. The view was indeed as spectacular as Liam had promised. Massive rock formations rising from the valley below, their surfaces veined with copper and crystal that caught the sunlight and transformed it into cascades of color. Ira guided her hoverchair to the edge of an outcropping, feeling a strange vertigo as she looked down at the valley so far below. The sensation was not unpleasant. It was exhilarating, a reminder that the world was vast and she was small within it, yet still a part of it. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Worth the journey?" Liam asked, settling beside her on a flat rock. "Yes," Ira replied without hesitation. "Thank you for bringing me here." They sat in comfortable silence as the larger sun touched the horizon, setting the cliffs ablaze with reflected light. The smaller sun would remain in the sky for another hour, but the double sunset, when both suns aligned perfectly on the horizon, was still a rare and cherished sight. "On Earth," Liam said eventually, "there's a saying that the journey matters more than the destination." Ira considered this. Zeraxians would disagree. "For us, efficiency is paramount. The quickest path to reproduction, to continuation of our genetic lines. The journey is irrelevant." "And yet here you are," Liam observed, "enjoying the journey." The implications of a statement settled over Ira like a revelation. Yes, here she was experiencing something purely for the experience itself. Not for its utility, not for a contribution to Zeraxian society or genetic legacy, but simply because it filled her with wonder. As the larger sun disappeared completely and the smaller sun cast its gentler light over the landscape, Liam reached into his pack and removed a small device. "I brought something for you," he said. "Our team has been experimenting with adaptive prosthetics based on our research. This is a prototype designed to work with Zeraxian physiology." He held out what appeared to be two slender, metallic appendages. "Leg prosthetics. They would attach to your atrophied lower limbs and, with practice, allow you to walk. If you wanted to, that is." Ira stared at the devices, astonished. "But Zeraxians don't walk." "It's considered primitive, yes, but also liberating on terrain like this." Liam set the prosthetics down between them. "It's entirely your choice. Just an option if you ever wanted to experience movement differently." Ira reached out hesitantly and touched one of the prosthetics. The metal was warm from being in Liam's pack, and it hummed faintly with contained energy. She tried to imagine herself using them, standing upright like Liam instead of hovering perpetually in her chair. The idea was terrifying and thrilling. "I don't know if I can," she said honestly. "You don't have to decide now," Liam replied. "Or ever, if you don't want to. But if you're interested, I can help you learn." As they made their way back to the settlement in the deepening twilight, the prosthetics safely stowed in Liam's pack, Ira felt something shifting within her. A recognition that perhaps her path was not as fixed as she had believed, that there might be choices available to her beyond the narrow existence Zeraxian society had prescribed. For the first time in many cycles, she allowed herself to wonder, what if? The prosthetics remained hidden in Ira's dwelling for nearly a full cycle of the distant third sun. Occasionally, late at night, she would remove them from their hiding place beneath her sleeping platform and examine them by the dim light of her glow lamp. They were beautiful in their way, smooth, lightweight metal that captured and reflected light like the mirror roots. Liam had explained how they would interface with her nervous system, learning her movements and intentions until they became extensions of her, rather than external devices. The possibility both frightened and fascinated her. To walk, a skill Zeraxians had abandoned generations ago, considering it beneath their evolved state. To be upright, facing the world at eye level rather than looking up from her hover chair. To traverse terrain that was currently inaccessible to her. One evening, after a particularly productive day at the greenhouse where she had successfully cross-pollinated 2 species of medicinal fungi, Ira made her decision. She contacted Liam through the communication device he had given her. "I want to try," she said simply when his face appeared on the small screen. He understood immediately. "Are you sure?" Ira nodded. "Yes, but not where others can see." "Not yet." They arranged to meet the following evening at a secluded area near the research greenhouse, after the other human scientists had departed for their living quarters. When Ira arrived, she found Liam waiting with a small medical kit and what appeared to be support bars similar to those used in physical rehabilitation facilities. "We'll take it slowly," he assured her as he helped her from her hover chair onto a prepared surface. "The neural interface needs time to calibrate to your specific physiology." The process of attaching the prosthetics was less uncomfortable than Ira had anticipated. There was a brief, tingling sensation as the connectors bonded with her atrophied limbs, followed by a strange warmth as the neural pathways activated. "Can you feel this?" Liam asked, touching the end of one prosthetic limb. To Ira's astonishment, she could, not as directly as she would feel touch on her natural skin, but as a distinct pressure and temperature. "Yes," she breathed, amazed. "I can feel it. Good. That means the neural interface is functioning correctly." Liam moved to stand beside the support bars. "Now, let's try having you hold these while I help you stand." The first attempt to rise from the seated position was awkward and uncertain. Ira's natural sense of balance, accustomed to the hover chair's stabilizing technology, struggled to adjust to the vertical orientation. She gripped the support bars tightly, her arms trembling with the effort. "I can't," she gasped as her prosthetic limbs wobbled beneath her. "You can," Liam countered gently. "Your body is learning something new. Give it time." They practiced for nearly an hour, standing, shifting weight from one prosthetic limb to the other, finding the center of balance. By the end of the session, Ira could remain upright for several minutes at a time, though still reliant on the support bars. "This is remarkable progress for a first attempt," Liam told her as he helped her back into her hover chair. "Your neural adaptation is faster than I expected." Ira flexed her natural arms, feeling the unfamiliar ache of muscles used in new ways. "It's different than I imagined. More physical. Walking is a complex action," Liam explained. "It requires constant adjustment, awareness of your body in space. But with practice, it becomes second nature." "Will we continue tomorrow?" Ira asked, surprising herself with her eagerness. Liam smiled. "Absolutely. Same time, same place." Over the following weeks, Ira's progress was steady and remarkable. From standing supported, she advanced to taking tentative steps while holding the bars, then to walking short distances with Liam's steadying hand at her elbow. Each session left her physically exhausted but mentally exhilarated. One evening, approximately 20 days into their training, Liam suggested they try something new. "I think you're ready to walk outdoors," he said. "Just a short distance on the path behind the greenhouse." Ira hesitated. Until now, all their sessions had been conducted inside the greenhouse after hours, safe from potential observation or judgment. "What if someone sees?" "It's your body," Liam said simply. "Your choice how to move it through the world. Your body. Your choice." The concept was so foreign to Xeraxian society, where the body, particularly the female body, was considered community property, its primary value measured in reproductive capacity. "Okay," Ira decided. "Let's try." The sensation of walking on natural ground, rather than the greenhouse's smooth floor, was altogether different. The prosthetics adjusted automatically to the uneven surface, providing stability Ira hadn't expected. The night air against her skin, the gentle resistance of the path beneath her feet, the slight sway of her body with each step, all combined to create a feeling of connection to the world around her that she had never experienced from her hover chair. "How does it feel?" Liam asked as they made their way slowly down the moonlit path. Ira considered the question, searching for words to describe the complex sensations. "Free," she said finally. "It feels like freedom." They had walked perhaps 50 meters when a sound from ahead caused them both to stop. Voices approached, Xeraxian voices, speaking in the formal tones of elders. "The botanical project must be more closely monitored," one was saying. "These humans and their experiments." Ira froze, panic rising in her throat. To be discovered walking on prosthetic limbs like a primitive outside of her designated hover chair. Liam seemed to sense her fear. "Your choice," he said quietly. "We could turn back." But something had shifted in Ira during these weeks of learning to walk. of reclaiming movement on her own terms. A determination had taken root, as tenacious as the mirror roots that grew in the crevices of the eastern cliffs. No, she decided. I want to continue. They resumed walking, and moments later rounded a bend in the path to face 3 Zeraxian elders, including Elder Saxari, who had pronounced Ira defective nearly a decade earlier. The elders stopped abruptly, their hover platforms humming in the sudden silence. Their eyes widened as they took in the sight of Ira walking upright on prosthetic limbs, Liam at her side. What abomination is this? Elder Saxari demanded, his voice sharp with shock and disapproval. Ira felt Liam tense beside her, ready to defend her, but she placed a hand on his arm. This was her moment to speak. No abomination, Elder, she said, her voice steadier than she had expected. Just a different way of moving through the world. You mock our evolved state, another elder accused. Returning to primitive locomotion. I choose movement that allows me to explore terrain your hover platforms cannot navigate, Ira replied. The eastern cliffs, for instance, are quite remarkable at sunset. The elders exchanged glances, clearly unsettled by her calm defiance. Elder Saxary's expression hardened. You have always been defective, Ira. First your reproductive failure, now this regression to primitive behavior. You dishonor your lineage. The words were meant to shame her, to reinforce the narrative of deficiency that had defined her existence for so long. But standing upright, feeling the ground solid beneath her prosthetic feet, Ira found the words had lost their power to wound. My body, my choice, she said, echoing Liam's earlier statement. Good evening, elders. And with that, she continued walking forward, forcing the elders to move their hover platforms aside or risk physical contact, a taboo in Zeraxian society, particularly with someone deemed defective. After a moment of stunned silence, the elders parted, their expressions a mixture of outrage and disbelief as Ira and Liam walked past them and continued down the path. Are you all right? Liam asked when they were beyond earshot. Ira realized she was trembling, but not from fear or shame. Rather, she felt a surge of something she had almost forgotten, pride, dignity, self-determination. Yes, she said, I am. More than all right. The encounter with the elders marked a turning point. Word spread quickly through the settlement about Ira's primitive behavior and her open defiance of Elder Saxari. Some Zeraxians began to avoid the research greenhouse, not wanting to be associated with controversy. Others, however, showed unexpected interest. A few younger Zeraxians sought Ira out, asking cautious questions about the prosthetics, about what it felt like to walk rather than hover. Some even expressed admiration for her courage in challenging traditional restrictions. Most surprising was a visit from Ira's mother, whom she had not seen in nearly 5 cycles. The older female appeared at Ira's dwelling one evening. Her hover platform maintained the proper distance as dictated by the rules of containment. The elders are disturbed by your behavior, her mother said without preamble. There is talk of formal censure, perhaps even banishment to the outer regions. Ira had expected as much. And you? Are you disturbed as well? Her mother's gaze dropped. I am. Uncertain. The old ways have always been clear. But seeing you now, hearing about your work with the human researchers, she hesitated, then continued more softly. You seem changed. Not just physically, but in your spirit. I am changed, Ira acknowledged. I've discovered that my value doesn't depend on reproductive capacity, that my body can be more than a failed vessel for continuing our genetic line. Her mother seemed to struggle with this concept, her brow furrowing in the way Ira remembered from childhood when she encountered an idea that challenged her understanding of the world. The human, Liam. The elders say he has corrupted your thinking. Ira smiled slightly. Liam has shown me possibilities, yes, but the choices have been mine. The thinking has been mine. Her mother nodded slowly, then reached into a compartment in her hover platform and withdrew a small package wrapped in traditional Zeraxian binding cloth. This was your grandmother's, she said, extending the package across the mandated distance. She asked that it be given to you when you found your path. I didn't understand what she meant until now. Ira accepted the package, careful not to make physical contact with her mother's hand. Inside the binding cloth, she found a pendant, a small mirror root encased in crystal, suspended on a chain of woven metal. Grandmother was an herbalist before the medical technologies replaced traditional healing, her mother explained. She understood the regenerative properties of the mirror root long before the human researchers arrived. Ira held the pendant up to the light, watching as it captured and refracted the glow lamp's illumination. "Thank you," she said, emotion tightening her throat. Her mother inclined her head in acknowledgement, then activated her hover platform to depart. At the doorway, she paused. The annual blessing ceremony is in 3 days. All citizens are permitted to attend the public portions, even those with your status. After her mother left, Ira sat holding the pendant for a long time, thinking about her grandmother, a woman she barely remembered, but who had apparently seen something in her young granddaughter that others had missed. Something worth preserving, worth honoring with this gift. The annual blessing ceremony was among the most significant events in Zeraxian society, a celebration of fertility and continuation of genetic lineage. The central ritual was restricted to females with functioning reproductive sacs, but the opening ceremonies and final blessing were open to all citizens. All citizens technically included Ira, though in practice, those with her defective status rarely attended, knowing they would be relegated to the furthest viewing areas and subjected to uncomfortable stares and whispers. But now, with her grandmother's pendant around her neck and the knowledge that at least some in the settlement viewed her differently, Ira considered attending for the first time since her diagnosis. She discussed the possibility with Liam the next day as they worked together in the greenhouse. "If you want to go, I'll support your decision," he said. "But you should be prepared for negative reactions, particularly from the more traditional elements of your society." Ira nodded, carefully measuring nutrients for a batch of seedlings. "I've lived with negative reactions for most of my life. But this will be different, more public, more deliberate. It would also be a statement," Liam observed, "that you belong in your community, defect or no defect." "That's just it," Ira said, looking up from her work. "I've been thinking about that word, defect, as if I'm a machine manufactured incorrectly or a crop that failed to yield. But I'm neither. I'm a living being, whole and complete in myself, regardless of my reproductive capacity." Liam smiled, a warmth in his eyes that Ira had come to treasure. "Exactly." The decision crystallized within her. "I'll attend the ceremony, and I'll walk in on my prosthetic limbs, not in my hover chair." The day of the annual blessing ceremony arrived, dawning with the characteristic double sunrise that Zeraxians considered particularly auspicious. Ira prepared carefully, selecting her formal garments, unworn from many cycles, and securing her grandmother's pendant around her neck. Her mother's message had indicated that the public portions of the ceremony would begin at midday in the central plaza. As that hour approached, Ira attached her prosthetic limbs and practiced walking around her small dwelling, focusing on maintaining the fluid gait she had developed over weeks of training. When she felt ready, she stepped outside, leaving her hover chair behind for the first time. The settlement paths were more crowded than usual, with Zeraxians heading toward the central plaza. Ira took a deep breath and began walking, her back straight, her gaze forward. The reactions were immediate and varied. Some Zeraxians stopped and stared openly, their shock evident. Others quickened the pace of their hover platforms, avoiding eye contact. A few younger Zeraxians watched with what appeared to be curiosity or even admiration. Ira continued walking steadily, conscious of every step, every breath. The weight of stairs pressed against her skin like physical touch, but she refused to hurry or to show discomfort. This was her choice, her body, her mode of movement through the world. As she neared the central plaza, the crowd thickened. The segregated viewing areas came into sight, prime positions near the ceremonial dais for females of reproductive age and their families, secondary positions for males and elder females past reproduction, and the furthest positions for visitors and those with various forms of defective status. Without hesitation, Ira walked toward the area designated for her status. As she did, she became aware of a figure moving parallel to her path. Liam, dressed in formal Earth attire, nodding respectfully to Zeraxians as he made his way to the visitor section. Their eyes met briefly across the crowd, and he offered a small smile of encouragement. Ira felt a surge of gratitude for his presence, for his quiet support of her choice without attempting to make it about him or his influence. She had just reached the edge of her designated viewing area when a high, clear voice called out, "Ira, you came." Turning, she saw a young female, perhaps 12 cycles old, guiding her hover platform toward her. It took Ira a moment to recognize Narai, a distant cousin she had not seen since before her diagnosis. "Narai," she acknowledged, surprised. "Yes, I decided to attend this year." The young female's eyes widened as she took in Ira's prosthetic limbs. "You're walking, like the humans do." "Yes," Ira confirmed, preparing for disgust or mockery. Instead, Narai looked impressed. "Can you climb with those? Go places hover platforms can't reach." "I'm learning to," Ira said, startled by the question. "I visited the Eastern Cliffs." "The Eastern Cliffs?" Narai's eyes shone with excitement. "I've always wanted to see them, but Mother says hover platforms can't navigate the terrain safely." Before Ira could respond, a sharp voice cut through their conversation. "Narai, return to your proper place immediately." Elder Saxari approached, his hover platform humming with accelerated power, indicating his agitation. His gaze fixed on Ira with undisguised hostility. "You dare to corrupt the young with your aberrant behavior," he said, his voice low but carrying in the suddenly quiet space around them. "This sacred ceremony is not the place for your display." Ira felt a familiar constriction in her chest, the old fear, the ingrained response to authority, to the judgment that had shaped her existence for so long. But alongside it rose something newer and stronger. The certainty that had been growing within her since that first day Liam had showed her the mirror route. "I am a citizen of this settlement," she said clearly. "I have every right to attend the public portions of the ceremony. On a proper hover platform, observing the rules of containment for your defective status." Elder Saxary's voice rose, not flaunting primitive appendages and engaging with unblemished youth. Around them, a crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the confrontation. Ira was acutely aware of the many eyes upon her, the whispers spreading through the assembled Zeraxians. In the distance, she could see Liam watching intently, concern evident in his posture though he remained where he was, allowing her to handle the situation herself. Something within Ira shifted, a final liberation from the shame that had been placed upon her so long ago. She straightened to her full height on her prosthetic limbs and met Elder Saxary's gaze directly, a breach of protocol for someone of her status. "I am not a defect," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the sudden hush. "I am Ira, daughter of Xyla, granddaughter of Alera the herbalist. My body does not produce life in the traditional Zeraxian way, but that does not diminish my worth or my right to exist fully in this community." Gasps rippled through the crowd at her boldness. Elder Saxary's skin flushed with the deep violet of extreme anger. "You forget your place." "No," Ira countered calmly. "For the first time, I am finding my place. Not the one assigned to me based on a single physical characteristic, but the one I choose for myself." She lifted her grandmother's pendant so that it caught the light of the twin suns. "Our ancestors understood that life takes many forms, that value exists beyond reproduction. Somewhere, we've forgotten that wisdom." From the crowd, a voice called out, one of the younger females who had visited the greenhouse with questions about the prosthetics. "Let her speak. I want to hear more." Another voice joined in, then another. Mostly younger Zeraxians, but also a few older ones, including, to Ira's astonishment, her mother, who had guided her hover platform to the edge of the gathering. Elder Saxari looked around, clearly unprepared for this display of support. "This is disrupting a sacred ceremony," he protested. "The blessing cannot proceed with such disorder." "Then perhaps the blessing needs to evolve," came a new voice, strong, authoritative, and unexpected. The crowd parted to reveal Elder Nari, the oldest member of the council and keeper of the ancient records. Her hover platform moved forward until she was between Ira and Elder Saxari. I have watched this young female, Elder Nari continued, addressing the crowd. Observed her work with the Earth researchers, her development of new mobility, her courage in the face of isolation. And I have consulted the earliest records from before the great technological advancement. She turned to face Ira directly. Our ancestors honored diversity, including those whose bodies functioned differently. They understood that community strength came from variety, not uniformity. It is we who have forgotten, who have narrowed the definition of value to a single function. Elder Saxari sputtered in protest, but Elder Nari continued, her ancient authority silencing him. The annual blessing celebrates life and continuation. Ira has found a new path of continuation, through knowledge, through adaptation, through courage. She belongs at this ceremony, as do all who seek to honor life in its many forms. A murmur ran through the crowd, surprise, consideration, and increasingly, assent. Elder Nari turned her hover platform to address the gathered Zeraxians. The blessing will proceed as scheduled, but with this addition, a recognition of all paths of continuation, all contributions to our community's future. She extended a gnarled hand toward Ira. Will you join the processional, Ira, daughter of Zyla, granddaughter of Alera? Walking on your chosen limbs, representing a path of continuation through knowledge and adaptation. Ira stood still for a moment, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. Her gaze found Liam in the crowd, his expression a mixture of pride and something deeper, something that made her heart beat faster in her chest. I will, she said at last, turning back to Elder Nari. With honor. What followed was unprecedented in Zeraxian history. A young female with non-functioning reproductive sacs, walking on prosthetic limbs inspired by human technology, participating in the ceremonial processional alongside those selected for their reproductive excellence. As she walked the path around the central plaza, Ira felt a profound shift within herself and within the community. Change had begun. Not complete acceptance, not yet, but a crack in the rigid structures that had defined Zeraxian society for generations. When the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Liam made his way to her side, his eyes bright with emotion. You were magnificent, he said softly. It feels like a beginning, Ira replied, still processing the events of the day. For me, perhaps for others like me as well. They walked together toward the outskirts of the settlement, comfortable in shared silence. The twin suns were beginning their descent, casting long shadows across the landscape. Will you return to Earth someday? Ira asked suddenly, the question emerging from a place of vulnerability she had only recently begun to acknowledge. Liam considered her question thoughtfully. Eventually, yes, but the research project has been extended for at least another 2 cycles. There's still so much to learn about Zeraxian botany, so many potential benefits for both our worlds. Relief flooded through Ira, though she tried not to examine too closely why the prospect of his departure troubled her so deeply. And you? Liam asked. What will you do now? After today, I imagine the council may reconsider your status, perhaps offer more opportunities within the community. Ira nodded slowly. Perhaps, but I've found purpose in our research that I never had before. I'd like to continue, if that's possible. More than possible, Liam assured her. You're essential to the project now. Your knowledge, your insights, we couldn't proceed effectively without you. Essential. The word settled around her like a warm embrace. To be necessary, valued for her contributions rather than judged for her deficiencies. It was a transformation she was still learning to believe. They had reached the path that led to her dwelling, now bathed in the golden light of sunset. Liam paused, something in his expression shifting. Ira, he began, then hesitated. These past weeks, working together, Watching you reclaim your place in your community, it's been extraordinary. You've been extraordinary. A warmth spread through Ira's chest, unfamiliar yet welcome. You helped make it possible, she acknowledged. But you never tried to fix me or make my choices for me. You offered possibilities and then stood beside me while I found my own path. Because that's what. Liam paused again, searching for words. That's what equals do for each other. Partners. The word hung between them, laden with meaning beyond its simple definition. Ira felt her pulse quicken, a response entirely separate from her defect, a reminder that her body was whole and alive and capable of experiences beyond what Zeraxian society had deemed valuable. Partners, she repeated softly. Yes, I think that's what we've become. Liam stepped closer, his eyes asking a question his voice did not form. Ira answered by closing the remaining distance between them, allowing her body to make contact with his, a profound breach of Zeraxian protocol, yet felt like the most natural action in the world. His arms encircled her, steadying her on her prosthetic limbs, though she needed no assistance. The contact was gentle, respectful, yet charged with an energy that made her skin tingle and her breath catch. "Is this okay?" he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "Yes," Ira replied, her voice hardly more than a whisper. More than okay. When their lips met, it was a communion of two beings from different worlds finding common language in touch, in shared breath, in the ancient chemistry of attraction that transcended physiological differences. Zeraxians did not kiss. Reproduction was a clinical process involving the synchronization of reproductive sacs, but Ira found her body instinctively responding to this human form of intimacy, her nerve endings alive with sensation. As the twin suns disappeared below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the deepening violet sky, Ira and Liam remained entwined, explorers of a new territory where defects and differences dissolved into irrelevance, where wholeness was found not in conformity, but in connection. In the cycles that followed, changes rippled through Zeraxian society. The Council of Elders, led by Elder Nari, began reviewing ancient records predating the great technological advancement, discovering that their ancestors had indeed valued diversity of form and function far more than modern Zeraxian culture. The rules of containment for defective citizens were gradually modified, then eventually abolished altogether. Ira was invited to speak with younger Zeraxians about her experiences, about the value of questioning rigid definitions of worth. The research partnership between Earth scientists and Zeraxian botanists flourished, yielding medical advances beneficial to both societies. Ira became a central figure in this collaboration, her unique perspective bridging the gap between traditional Zeraxian knowledge and innovative human approaches. And through it all, her partnership with Liam deepened, defying categorization by either Zeraxian or human standards. They moved between their separate dwellings and cultures while creating something new together, a shared language of respect, desire, and mutual growth. It was approximately 3 cycles after the annual blessing ceremony when Ira first noticed the changes in her body. Subtle at first, a heightened sensitivity, to sense a persistent weariness in the early hours, a fullness in her lower abdomen that had not been there before. She dismissed these symptoms initially, attributing them to the increased physical activity of walking regularly on her prosthetic limbs or perhaps to some mild virus contracted during field research. But when the area around her dormant reproductive sacs began to tingle and occasionally emit a faint, pulsing glow, Ira could no longer ignore the signs. What she was experiencing should have been impossible for someone with her physiology, yet the evidence was becoming increasingly difficult to deny. She consulted with a medical professional in secret, not a traditional Zeraxian healer who might report her condition to the council, but a human doctor attached to the research team, sworn to confidentiality. "It's unprecedented," Dr. Helena Myers told her after conducting a thorough examination. "Your reproductive sacs have activated, and there appears to be, well, there's no other way to describe it. You're carrying a developing life form. You're pregnant, Ira." Ira stared at the diagnostic imagery floating above the examination table, showing the unmistakable presence of a tiny being nestled within her previously defective reproductive system. But how? I was diagnosed as completely non-functional. Dr. Myers shook her head, clearly fascinated despite her professional demeanor. My best guess? Prolonged exposure to the compounds in the mirror roots you've been working with, combined with your unique physiology and possibly, well, your relationship with Liam. Interspecies reproduction is supposed to be impossible, Ira said, still trying to process the implications. Our genetic structures are entirely different. And yet, here we are, the doctor replied, gesturing to the imagery. The developing embryo shows characteristics of both Xeraxian and human physiology. It's a true hybrid, something that should be scientifically impossible. Ira placed a hand over her abdomen, feeling a connection to the life growing within her that transcended scientific explanation. What happens now? That's entirely up to you, Dr. Myers said gently. This pregnancy is unprecedented, so there are many unknowns. But if you choose to continue, I'll provide whatever medical support you need. And of course, you'll need to tell Liam. Telling Liam proved to be simultaneously the easiest and most difficult conversation of Ira's life. They were working together in the greenhouse, cataloging a new batch of medicinal fungi, when she finally gathered the courage to speak. There's something I need to tell you, she began, setting down her datapad. Something unexpected has happened. Something that should be impossible. Liam looked up from his work, his expression immediately concerned. Are you all right? Ira paused, searching for the right words. I'm pregnant, Liam. We're going to have a child together. The data pad slipped from Liam's fingers, clattering to the floor. But that's impossible. Yes, and yet it's happening. Ira explained what Dr. Myers had told her about the mirror root compounds, about the hybrid nature of the developing embryo. When she finished, Liam remained silent for a long moment, his expression cycling through shock, confusion, and finally settling into something that looked remarkably like wonder. A child, he said at last, his voice barely audible. Our child. You're not disturbed by this? Ira asked hesitantly. Liam moved to her side, taking her hands in his. Disturbed? Ira, this is miraculous. A life created between us, across species, across worlds. His eyes filled with emotion. But what about you? How do you feel about this? The question was so characteristic of him. Always concerned first with her autonomy, her choices, her well-being. Ira felt a surge of affection, so powerful it momentarily took her breath away. I feel. She considered the complex emotions swirling within her. I feel like the universe is reminding us that life finds ways to continue that we cannot predict or control. That defects are often just variations waiting for the right conditions to express themselves. That wholeness comes in forms we haven't imagined yet. She placed one of his hands over her abdomen. I want this child, Liam. Our child. His arms encircled her, holding her with a gentleness that acknowledged both her strength and the precious new life she carried. Then we'll face whatever comes together. Partners. Partners, Ira agreed, leaning into his embrace. The pregnancy progressed unlike any documented in either Xeraxian or human medical records. Ira's formerly dormant reproductive sacs now glowed continuously with a soft blue light that intensified over time. Her body adapted to support the developing hybrid life with remarkable efficiency, as if her defective system had simply been waiting for the right catalyst. Word spread throughout the settlement despite their attempts at discretion. The reactions were predictably mixed. Outrage from traditionalists who considered interspecies reproduction an abomination, cautious interest from the scientific community, and surprisingly, quiet support from a growing number of Xeraxians who had begun to question the rigid structures of their society. Elder Nari visited Ira personally, her ancient eyes examining the glow of Ira's reproductive sacs with keen interest. The oldest records speak of such possibilities, the elder told her. Before we narrowed our definition of acceptable reproduction, before we began selective breeding for specific traits. Our ancestors believed life would always find expression, even when we thought we had constrained it to our preferred forms. She placed a gnarled hand briefly on Ira's shoulder, a profound breach of protocol that symbolized her rejection of the old taboos surrounding defective citizens. Your child will be the first of a new understanding, Elder Nari said, a bridge between worlds, between past and future. The birth occurred during a rare alignment of all three suns, a celestial event that occurred only once every 70 cycles. Zeraxian astrologers considered it the most auspicious of times, representing perfect harmony between disparate elements. With Dr. Myers overseeing the process and Liam at her side, Ira brought their child into the world after hours of labor unlike anything documented in Zeraxian medical history. The traditional birth process for Zeraxians involved the simple release of a fully formed infant from the reproductive sac, brief, painless, and entirely clinical. What Ira experienced was more akin to human childbirth, intense, physical, transformative. When it was over, when the tiny being was placed in her arms, the exhaustion and pain receded into insignificance. The child had Ira's pale blue skin, though warmer in tone than pure Zeraxian coloring. Its eyes, when they opened, revealed irises of deep brown like Liam's, set within the slightly elongated eye structure characteristic of Zeraxians. Most remarkable were the tiny, luminescent sacs at the base of its neck, perfectly formed reproductive organs that pulsed with a gentle glow, indicating full functionality. A daughter, Dr. Myers confirmed after examining the infant. And as far as I can determine, completely healthy, a perfect hybrid of both your species. Liam sat beside Ira on the birthing platform, his face awestruck as he gently touched their daughter's tiny hand. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "What shall we name her?" Ira looked down at the child in her arms, this impossible being whose existence defied everything she had been taught about her own defective body, about the limits of life and connection. "Kai," she said softly. In the ancient Zeraxian language, it means from silence, life emerges. "Kai," Liam repeated, testing the name. "It's perfect." As word of the birth spread through the settlement, Zeraxians began to gather outside the medical facility, their hover platforms forming concentric circles as they waited for news. When Dr. Myers finally emerged to announce that both mother and child were healthy, a cheer rose from the assembled crowd, tentative at first, then swelling into a genuine celebration. Among the well-wishers who came to offer congratulations in the days that followed were many who had once shunned Ira for her defect. Some came out of curiosity, others from genuine changes of heart as the rigid structures of Zeraxian society continued to evolve. Even Elder Saxari made an appearance, though his congratulations were stiff and formal. "The council has ruled that the child will be registered as a full citizen," he informed them, despite its unusual origins. Ira corrected gently but firmly. "Not it. Her name is Kai, and she is not unusual. She is perfectly herself." The elder's expression tightened, but he inclined his head in acknowledgement before departing. Progress, Ira reflected, came in small steps as well as grand gestures. As Kai grew over the following months, she became a symbol of possibility within the settlement. Young Zeraxians in particular were drawn to her, fascinated by this living embodiment of connection across difference. Ira and Liam found themselves at the center of a quiet revolution, not one that sought to overthrow Zeraxian traditions entirely, but rather to expand them, to recover the more inclusive understanding of their ancestors. On Kai's first naming day, marked by a small gathering of friends from both the Zeraxian community and the Earth research team, Ira stood on her prosthetic limbs with her daughter in her arms and Liam at her side. Looking at the diverse faces surrounding them, some blue-skinned and hovering, others standing on 2 feet with varying shades of human coloring, she felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with physical perfection or adherence to societal expectations. "From silence, life emerges," she whispered to her daughter, whose tiny hand reached up to touch the mirror root pendant that still hung around Ira's neck. And sometimes, the life that emerges is beyond anything we could have imagined. Liam's arms slipped around her waist, his touch familiar and grounding. Beyond imagination, he agreed, but exactly what we needed. As the twin suns set and the distant third sun cast its gentle light across the gathering, Ira reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From isolation to connection, from defect to difference, from silence to voice. The path had not been easy, the transformation not complete, the challenges not entirely overcome. But in this moment, holding her impossible child, standing on limbs that had once been unimaginable, surrounded by a community that was slowly learning to value diversity rather than conformity, Ira knew the truth that would guide her forward. Wholeness was not the absence of defect, but the embrace of difference. And love, true love, was not about rescuing or fixing, but about witnessing and accompanying, about creating space for life to emerge in all its unpredictable, miraculous forms.